The Mexican-American War took place between 1846 and 1848. It was a fight between the United States and Mexico. This war changed the borders of both countries forever. The war started after the U.S. took Texas in 1845. Mexico still believed Texas was its land. The U.S. wanted more land, including California and New Mexico. The idea of expanding the U.S. was called manifest destiny. Many Americans thought they had the right to spread across the land. Mexico did not agree with this idea. The war was caused by disagreements over land. Mexico and the U.S. could not agree on where Texas ended. The U.S. said the border was at the Rio Grande. Mexico believed the border was at the Nueces River, farther north. This led to a major conflict. In 1846, U.S. soldiers moved into the disputed area, which angered Mexico. A battle happened between Mexican and U.S. soldiers. President Polk used this to ask Congress for war. Soon, the U.S. Army invaded Mexico from the north and the west. The U.S. Army had better weapons and more soldiers. The Mexican Army fought bravely, but was not as strong. The U.S. quickly took land in Texas, California, and beyond. Some people in the U.S. supported the war because they wanted more land. Others thought it was unfair. Some Americans believed the U.S. was bullying a weaker country. The war ended in 1848 with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Mexico lost half its land, including Texas, California, and other states. The U.S. became a larger country. The conflict between Mexico and the U.S. started years before the war. It began with Texas. In 1836, Texas fought a war to break away from Mexico. After winning, Texas became independent. But Mexico did not accept this. Most people in Texas wanted to join the U.S., but that caused problems. The U.S. did not take Texas right away. Many in the U.S. worried it would lead to war with Mexico. Others feared Texas would increase slavery. The U.S. was growing fast in the 1800s. Many Americans believed their country should expand to the Pacific Ocean. This idea was called manifest destiny. People thought it was their right to take new land. They wanted California, New Mexico, and other areas. But Mexico owned that land. Some U.S. leaders tried to buy land from Mexico. The U.S. offered money for California and Texas. Mexico refused because the land was important. In 1845, the U.S. took Texas and made it a state. Mexico was very angry. It still believed Texas was part of Mexico. This created more tension. Mexico and the U.S. also disagreed on the border. The U.S. said it was the Rio Grande. Mexico said it was the Nueces River. This disagreement made war more likely. Both sides sent soldiers to the area. Soon, a fight broke out, and the war officially began in 1846. In 1846, the U.S. and Mexico had serious disagreements. The U.S. sent soldiers to the Rio Grande, which Mexico saw as an invasion of its land. Mexico believed its border was at the Nueces River. It warned the U.S. to leave, but the U.S. refused. The situation became very dangerous. On April 25, 1846, Mexican troops attacked a group of U.S. soldiers. The fight took place in the disputed land between the two rivers. President James K. Polk used this attack to push for war. He told Congress that Mexico had shed American blood on American soil. Many in Congress agreed with Polk. They wanted to expand U.S. land. Some, however, believed Polk had planned the war from the start. On May 13, 1846, Congress officially declared war on Mexico. The U.S. prepared its army to invade Mexican territory from the north and west. Mexico was not ready for war. It had internal problems and a weak economy. Its army was brave, but not well equipped compared to the U.S. forces. The U.S. had better weapons and more trained soldiers. It quickly took control of key areas in Texas and then moved into Mexico. The war had begun. Both sides suffered losses, but the U.S. continued pushing forward. Soon, battles would take place deep inside Mexico. After the U.S. declared war, its army moved quickly. General Zachary Taylor led troops into northern Mexico. The first big battle happened in May 1846. This was the Battle of Palo Alto. The U.S. had better artillery, which helped them win. Mexican forces had to retreat after heavy losses. Soon after, they fought again at the Battle of Resaca de la Palma. The U.S. defeated the Mexican army, forcing them to leave Texas. The U.S. then attacked Monterrey in September 1846. This battle was much harder. Mexican soldiers defended the city bravely. Fighting lasted for days. The U.S. used new tactics, moving through houses instead of open streets. The Mexican army finally surrendered. After Monterrey, the U.S. paused its attacks. However, soon they would fight in bigger battles, moving deeper into Mexico. Meanwhile, in California, U.S. settlers started the Bear Flag Revolt. They wanted to take control from Mexico and join the U.S. naval forces arrived to help. By July 1846, they captured key cities, including Monterrey and Los Angeles. At first, Mexican forces pushed back, but in 1847, the U.S. regained control. California was now under U.S. rule. In 1847, the U.S. launched a major attack on central Mexico. General Winfield Scott led an invasion by sea at Veracruz. The U.S. bombarded the city for days before taking control. Then, Scott's army marched toward Mexico City, facing battles on the way. The biggest battle was at Chapultepec. Mexican forces fought bravely, but the U.S. won. Soon after, they entered Mexico City. The capture of Mexico City in September 1847 marked the war's final stage. The U.S. had won almost every battle. Mexico was running out of soldiers and supplies. Many leaders wanted to keep fighting, but others knew peace was needed. Soon, the two countries would begin peace talks. However, the effects of the war would last for many years. After the U.S. captured Mexico City in September 1847, the war was nearly over. Mexico had lost many battles and was running out of supplies. Some leaders wanted to keep fighting, but others knew Mexico could not win. They decided to negotiate a peace treaty with the U.S. diplomat named Nicholas Trist was sent to talk with Mexican officials. They met in the town of Guadalupe, Hidalgo in early 1848. The treaty was signed on February 2, 1848. It ended the war and made Mexico give up a large part of its land to the U.S. The U.S. took control of present-day California, Nevada, Utah, and parts of Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming. In return, the U.S. agreed to pay Mexico $15 million and promised to protect Mexicans living in the new U.S. territory. The treaty also set the Rio Grande as the official border between Mexico and Texas. This ended the long dispute over the border. Some people in Mexico were unhappy with the treaty because the country lost half of its land. They felt it was unfair. In the U.S., some people supported the treaty, while others thought the U.S. should take even more land from Mexico. The treaty changed both countries forever. The U.S. became much larger, while Mexico had to rebuild after losing so much land. The war left deep scars between the two nations. Many Mexicans felt anger toward the U.S. for taking their land. Even today, the war and the treaty are remembered as important events in the history of both countries. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo made the U.S. much larger. The new land included California, Nevada, Utah, and parts of other states. Many Americans were happy about this expansion. They believed it was their right to control more land from coast to coast. However, the new land created problems. People in the U.S. argued about whether slavery should be allowed in the new territories. The Wilmot Proviso was a plan to stop slavery from spreading to the new land. It passed in the House, but failed in the Senate. Some people in the North wanted slavery to end. People in the South wanted slavery to continue and even spread. These disagreements increased tensions between the North and South. They later helped lead to the American Civil War. The war also changed American politics. Many new leaders had fought in the war and later became important figures. Future Civil War generals, like Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee, gained experience in Mexico. Zachary Taylor became a war hero. He used his popularity to win the presidency in 1848, even though he had little political experience. The economy also changed. The new land had gold, silver, and rich farmland, which helped the U.S. grow stronger. The California Gold Rush started in 1848. Thousands of people moved west, hoping to find gold and build a better life. The war made the U.S. more powerful, but it also created divisions that would cause problems in the future. The war had a terrible effect on Mexico. It lost almost half of its land, including Texas, California, and other territories. Many Mexicans felt angry and humiliated. They believed the U.S. had taken advantage of Mexico's weakness. The country had also lost many soldiers, and its economy was badly damaged. Mexico needed time to recover. The government in Mexico became weaker. People blamed their leaders for losing the war and the land. There were many political struggles. Different groups fought for control, and some leaders were removed from power. Santa Anna, the Mexican president, lost support and had to leave the country. New leaders tried to fix the problems. Losing land meant losing natural resources. The new U.S. territories had gold, silver, and rich farmland. Mexico's economy suffered because it no longer had access to these important resources. Many people became poorer. Trade also became harder because Mexico lost important ports and land routes that connected cities and markets. The war also affected Mexico's people. Many who lived in the lost territories suddenly became part of the U.S. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo said they could become U.S. citizens, but many faced discrimination. Back in Mexico, the war created lasting sadness and distrust toward the U.S. that continues today. The Mexican-American War changed both countries forever. It shaped the future of North America in many important ways. The U.S. became larger and stronger. The new land helped its economy grow and gave it more power in the world. However, the war also increased tensions inside the U.S. and made the divide between the North and South worse. In the years after the war, the U.S. faced more conflicts over slavery. People argued about whether slavery should exist in the new land. These arguments helped cause the American Civil War in 1861, just 13 years after the war with Mexico ended. The war also showed that the U.S. was ready to use its military to expand, which worried other countries. For Mexico, the war was a national tragedy. Losing so much land hurt its economy, government, and people. Political problems continued for years. Mexico had many changes in leadership and even fought a civil war. Even today, many Mexicans feel the war was unfair. It left a deep scar in the country's history and its relationship with the U.S. The war also affected Mexican Americans. People who had lived in Mexico suddenly became part of the U.S. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo promised them rights, but many faced discrimination and lost their land. The war changed borders, but it also changed lives. Its effects are still felt in both countries today.